Good morning, and thank you for joining How to Motivate Customer Action and Drive Revenue with Personalized Generative AI with Assaf Baciu, co-founder and COO of Persado. As a reminder, if you have any questions during the conversation, to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now, here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Great. I'd love to go ahead and start my video as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're very honored to have the opportunity to speak to Assaf to learn more about, what's happening right now and some of the changes in the macro environment, how we're looking at, the impact of this on everything we do. And, we've all talked a lot about over the past years about really how to leverage AI in our day-to-day businesses. And I think, what we're going to learn today is about looking at this to really enhance personalization. Two of the, I would say, top topics we're having, in frequent conversation today around personalization and loyalty. And I think we're going to see through today's conversation kind of where the state of the state is and what the opportunities are, and really ultimately how to leverage and drive better top line and bottom line. So as we look at this first slide in terms of, how retailers are facing macro and secular headwinds as we head into 2023, and there's lots of conversations around, is there a chance for a, kind of more drastic slowdown in the economy? What's happening with all this excess inventory? What will be the impact? And, Assaf, as you're kind of seeing all of this and, especially on a global basis, how do you see the consumer mindset shifting, and is it faster or slower than you think, everyone thinks?
So first of all, hi everybody, I am Assaf. And what we see and read about also from a variety of surveys is that consumers are reevaluating their priorities primarily, and some of them have shifted them. And we see that with some of our customers and even prospects, where, for example, the amount of items that remain in the basket, as an example, are there for longer. So there is always data to try to interpret what happens in the world, and I think the retailers have a lot of data they could use to do that. But that's one item. Another one is slightly lowering average order values. Is it as fast as I would expect given the status of or the state of the economy? Not. So we don't see the shift as drastic as it may be depicted yet, but it's definitely something to look out for. And I would urge every retailer to look at their data and see how their business is changing in terms of behavior. And this is available to them, I think, today.
And so if you kind of take a step back and items are staying in the basket for longer, what are you seeing from a conversion rate perspective?
So conversion rate perspective are always a struggle. We see a baseline that is slightly lower, at least slower than expected. I think it is expected to be that way for the next few months, at least the first half of 2023. And we see many CMOs, CDOs are looking into how to stabilize that and even grow that as much as they can. This is a major focus, actually.
So do you feel that the CMOs, CDOs are feeling more pressure to drive kind of top and bottom line? And if so, how are they approaching that?
So the first thing we see is that, and we heard actually from multiple of them, they're shifting budgets from paid media to, let's call it, own media to some extent. So even to a level where if they have a return that is, for example, below 4 or 5 times their investment, it's already a trigger to shift investments, which shows the level of maybe the influence of the CFO on their decisions. Where they focus on, we see a lot of focus on personalization, broadly, sometimes more specifically, and we know that, for example, there is a major focus on trying to in this world to get first-time shoppers, for example, to a second purchase. And we also know that about 60% of shoppers say they are more likely to repeat purchases if they're offered a personalized shopping experience. So we see both the companies, CMOs, CEOs, CDOs focusing on that, as well as the customers expecting that to happen to continue to drive business or to engage with brands.
I think it's interesting you bring up this kind of first-time shopper, becoming a second-time shopper and just a more loyal shopper. What do you think are some of the keys to that, and has that kind of math changed?
I'll tell you what we see companies doing. So there is a tremendous attention to, for example, website personalization. So about 75% of e-commerce companies are investing in that personalized experience across what they deem are critical touch points. We think there are touch points they don't touch that are critical for them to look at, and we'll talk about it in a bit probably. But that's the major focus, and it's around primarily today finding a match between product offers, services, and a customer. So personalizing that aspect. A lot of focus on recommendation, on propensity models that will potentially drive relevance, and with that relevance, potentially a second purchase, or being part of eventually a loyalty program if they can, along with trying the benefits of that program, which is critical to maintain a customer in that program.
Before we move on to the next slide, I want to take a moment. There's a few questions that came in through the chat. So first, can AI drive only conversions or build preferences too?
It's a very good question. So I'll give you an example, if I may, and I'll use our part of AI, so personalized generative AI. I mentioned the focus on a website personalization. So a lot of investment is going there with technology and people and processes. And yet, maybe the most important page in that journey, which I would deem as the cart and the checkout page, from a language perspective, they practically never change. They're static. Now, to give you an example, if you apply their language that is personalized to that customer, and it's few words in the headline and the call to action, other places there, in the cart and the checkout page, you drive 3 to 5% more conversions. So does AI impact conversions? Absolutely. And as a guidance, creating a dynamic personal experience with language in that step can massively change the outcome of the entire investment that leads to that bottom of the funnel. Now, does it also allow you to build preference? I mentioned personalized generative AI. In our context, that preference is understanding the preference of how to talk to customers, which is extremely important. So with AI, you can build preferences around understanding what people prefer, given how they behave in terms of engagement on digital channels, what they put in their basket, how much they view a product, how many times they return. You build a profile of that customer with your first-party data. But you can also, in our case, generative AI for language, you can build also a view of how to talk to a given customer, which is critical in a world that moves further into the digital area or era, and where you meet less and less physically customers. So to answer the question, yes, there is an impact on conversions that is for sure there, but there is also a build-out of an understanding of the customer and their behavior. So AI is quite beneficial in that respect.
And that was from Mark. And then Royce asked, which is kind of building on the prior question that I asked you, can you give some examples of first-time shoppers going for second purchases through Persado initiatives?
Absolutely. So when after you do, so the knowledge of a first-time shopper and then the triggers to either engage them via email for example, or mobile, or when you see them on the site, this is, we'll call it first-party data. If that first-party data is then shared with Persado, we're able to understand that this is a second purchase, as an example. And Persado's uniqueness is in our language model, we have emotions, narratives, and other concepts of language that we know over the last 9 years drive behavior. So an emotion can be achievement or excitement or other out of 15 that we have classified. And given the first-party data of a client, we are able to predict what language concepts and the specific words that you need to apply will drive that customer to consider more seriously a second purchase offer. And this happens on email, again, on web, on mobile. The impact of that, if you apply, is about somewhere between 15 and 25% increase in the take rate of these second purchase offers, which is quite massive.
That's massive. I mean, took my breath away there for a minute. Wow, thank you. And thanks, Royce, for the question. As we move ahead to the next slide and we look at kind of how personalized language can help retailers stand out amid digital noise. I mean, I think there's, you know, to me, Assaf, it makes so much common sense. It's just that, right? I mean, these are things we've been talking about for years. It's just that, you know, what you are able to deliver is something kind of, you know, when we like wish upon a star, right? This is what we wish for. And so, you know, as we're seeing this trend of increased digital noise, I mean, if we think about how many messages we get in different channels, and sometimes, right, the same retailer has different messages in different channels, do you expect that to continue to increase? And if so, why now?
So yes, I think that essentially the share of digital is poised to grow. I think that most companies embarked in an accelerated mode into driving more business through digital channels. The acceleration started with the pandemic, but it continues. And what it means is very simple. The attention, which is in mathematical terms finite, is just distributed across more brands, more channels, more communications. And I think that will only grow, given the specific metrics even that many retailers have in terms of a number of or a desired penetration level of digital business versus offline, for example.
So if we take a step back and as a consumer, right, if we're getting more, if you will, marketing and advertising messages, some of them are relevant to us and some of them aren't, is there a point with which we just shut down? And then what actually do we react to?
So there is probably a point where we shut down and everybody has their own threshold for that. But we also are now accustomed to, for example, engage with companies online. So, for example, in the UK, I have the number in the UK because I'm now in London, but the number of 65 years old and over in engaging in online e-commerce doubled the last year. Okay, so there are more and more of them that are engaging in that. I think that they won't shut down, but what it means is that you obviously need to cut through the clutter, and there are two big ways to do that. One is with relevance of what you're talking about, and the second one is the relevance of how you talk about it. Now, again, in our case, for example, we focus on the how you talk about things to a given customer. How do you interact with them as if you knew them, such that what you tell them on any given offer is more engaging, more inspiring, and drives action. As we know, when you go to a store and somebody talks to you, they can say things, and the things they say, they actually impact us. And we are more engaged or less engaged given that interaction. And we emulate that online in our case, but not to take out of the importance of the relevance of what I'm talking about. And Amazon is essentially the precursor of that. Everybody knows that it's extremely personalized in terms of what you get in terms of offers or promotions, given your interaction with the company. So what products should I talk to you about?
I mean, it's not only Amazon, it's fascinating. I actually have set up, kind of different personas on different devices, and it is amazing to see, kind of the tailoring at this point of messages. But one question I've been thinking about quite a bit is, how does this differ for, let's say, CPG, beauty, more of the staples, drugstore, grocery versus, fashion, apparel, footwear, accessories? Do you see any kind of difference in terms of how, right? I mean, one item, right, you're either putting on your face or your body, or you're ingesting it, and the other is kind of, it's a different physical relationship between the product and the consumer. How does that come into play?
Are you referring to, for example, the impact of language on these different products, or more generally?
What kind of permission does the consumer give to a brand to have that conversation, and how much does personalization matter in those cases?
I think personalization always matter for us as humans. If I'm relevant to you, then I have more likelihood to engage with you and drive you to act. Again, in our case, if I focus on the language part, which I know very well, the way I talk to you about a beauty product or a credit card or an insurance product or apparel, for example, obviously will differ given the product, but will differ also given you. I'll give an example. For example, I can tell you, we call it narratives in our language model. It's very important. But if I sell a dress, I can tell you, buy this dress and reinvent yourself, or buy this dress and inspire, or buy this dress and turn heads. And these are different narratives that do not apply to everybody. They obviously do not apply to any type of industry. And in our case, these narratives are specific to specific verticals. So narratives for beauty are potentially completely different than narratives for travel or airlines. Okay, but this is how we use this knowledge of language, concepts, emotions, stories to tailor specifically to a given vertical, a given segment, a given person, what we tell them, and this actually changes behavior drastically.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, right? And actually somebody asked us with a few questions in the chat for the slide, but I think kind of building on the question I had asked, which is there a difference in messaging kind of retail versus institutional customers, and are the expectations the same for a retail site versus like insurance? I think it's a good way to build on that, if you can kind of help us get there.
Absolutely. First of all, there is a difference for a given brand versus another brand. So there is the aspect of brand voice that you want to carry. As if you think about generative AI, how do I emulate the brand voice within my language generation and personalization efforts? So that's one aspect, and it's possible to do. And definitely there is a difference between the language that I would be using in insurance, retail, travel, telecommunications. There is even a difference between channels. So if I have an emotion like achievement and I want to convey that on social versus an email subject line, email body, or a website, I will use slightly different words that convey the same concept, but are better applied to that specific touch point. And this is sophistication that is required to really tailor the communication to that specific moment, to that specific person. And if you achieve that, just to give you a sense, you are able, for an example, a mid-sized retailer, if you apply that language personalization across their customer touchpoints, you can create somewhere between $20 to $80 million of incremental revenue per year. This is the translation of talking to
big dollars.
In dollars, yes, it's in dollars. Dollar is still strong currently, so I'll talk in dollars. relative to the pound, but yes, in dollars. It's really a meaningful impact to talk to customers the way they want to be talked to. And if you nail that, then there is an immediate return.
That's immediate is a good thing. So Constantine asks us, how do you calibrate, tune those narratives so you can ensure they have a positive impact? What is the risk if we use the wrong language for a segment or individual? Very good question.
It's a very good question. So first of all, the beauty of AI that it's, in our case, for example, our model is connected to customer behavior. So we see immediately if something doesn't work. To talk about the probability of it not working or working less well than we thought, in 96% of the time, this generation is better than whatever was there in market. So it's very reliable, but we use data to evaluate that. So engagement and conversions. First of all, if they are more consistently, both more engagement and more conversions and over time, which is very important, then we know that that it works. If it doesn't, you immediately get the behavioral signal, which is you have less. And if you have less, you change. Now, with AI, you crunch this data very fast and you're able to adjust fast. So essentially change the language, obviously approve it for brand and legal reasons, and then put it in market. But it's all about adjusting how you talk to customers continuously. And today with generative AI and these capabilities, you can do that at scale. And this is the very interesting aspect of it.
And while we have a lot more questions for this slide, I'll choose one. How can we maintain sustainability where these AI and new gen tech consuming huge energy during computation?
So it's a fair concern. There is a lot of research going into how to train these models with much less resources. That's one thing. And it's a focus both from us on our side, but from Microsoft, Google, and others. There are even startups that are getting funded now to develop capabilities to train models at a much lower cost. And that cost is essentially this computation cost. Another aspect of it, and this is a hope, is that the new announcement from the US government around the fusion capability, so creating fusion power, will actually be implemented, and at some point we'll be able to generate very efficiently energy to sustain that. But that's the focus. The focus is on reducing the cost of computation, which essentially means more powerful computation with less energy.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's move ahead to the next slide, where we're looking at kind of this idea around this personalized generative AI and how can it's great to talk about it, right? We've over the past few years we've talked about a lot of things, but actually the business impact, and I think Assaf, you do such a great job of helping us frame this. And so as we kick it off, I mean, how important or how critical are factors of like speed and scalability to the success of personalized marketing? And how can generative AI tech really help retailers drive speed and scale in their personalization efforts? So if you can kind of frame that, and what does speed mean, right? What does fast mean?
That's a good question. So if we talk about generative AI and personalized generative AI, fast in this context would mean that within a retailer can start benefiting from that capability within 4 or 5 weeks if they chose to. And benefiting from that means that they take their touch points and communications, and at least in our case, they upload it to a platform, and we generate better performing language in a predictive capability. We have a massive knowledge base that was built over the last 9 years that allows us to predict what would work, as this is put in market and is connected to behavior via the customer's marketing stack, so their distribution systems. We you get results back, and the model adjusts based on these results. So in terms of deployment of that technology, if I compare it to an ESP or a CDP or other elements in the stack that are around data decisioning or distribution, it's by an order of magnitude faster to scale if you chose to. Now, the area that needs to be adjusted is the process of content generation and approvals to be able to absorb that content and put it in market confidently. And this is where it takes a bit of time for companies to do it. Retailers do it quite well in general. For example, financial services, it's a bit more harsh given the regulatory requirements around whatever you say to customers that needs to be validated and approved on the legal side. But again, in terms of scalability, it can scale very fast. I say that it's important if somebody wanted to scale fast to have executive support or leadership and say, given the, for example, importance of generative AI and its potential, we will put it in market and we will ask the teams or the relevant teams to use it to drive business. And once that is done, it's actually quite fast. The importance of scalability is it's very easy to see the results. And it's really a matter of desire to scale. And the scale means across channels and across communications. So if there is a decision to scale, you can, of course, start, let's say, walk or crawl, walk, and run. And crawl, walk means that you apply it to a couple of channels in a couple of places. And again, you see results immediately because it can be compared with whatever you currently have. So the comparison is simple. It's an A/B test between whatever you get from the personalized generative AI and whatever you had. And it runs in market.
That's very helpful. Maybe one of my favorite questions today is from Anil. Will we be seeing Persado in action? So I don't think we have a demo today. But Assaf, can you maybe help us just so that we can visualize those who are joining us and hearing about Persado for the first time? Just can you take us through how it works and allow them to kind of have that image?
Absolutely. So you have now an important website communication that runs for the next 3 months. It's a banner, for example. That banner, you take it, you upload it to Persado. It can be in HTML or image, whatever the format is. Our platform is able to understand what's in it from the concepts perspective. So does it have emotions or not? Does it have narratives or not? What type of? We also get information about what channel it is. You can add a bit of information around who you're targeting. And we take that in and we apply our knowledge base that is built on about 1 to 2 billion consumer interactions a year, so unique consumers. And we predict what should be the language for that communication and generate it. And the customer then in the platform can approve that message and deploy it via integrations or via Persado to their website directly. So integrations is Adobe Target, Optimizely, potentially others, or directly via Persado. The results that you get, again, via integrations or via our trackers, go back to Persado such that the next generation takes advantage of that. There is another level of personalization where if you connect your first-party data, so web session data in this example, plus anything you have in a CDP or a data lake, Persado is able to adjust in real time what language will appear for a given type of customer given their first-party data. And this is very powerful. Now, if I had to tell you where to start now, given what we've seen recently, you go to the shopping cart and you get 3 to 5% more conversion. So if you have $100 million that are converting in your checkout pages, it's very easy to do the math here. You get 3 to 5 million more out of personalizing that interaction, which means that you have the content that was generated, we get the data feeds of your first-party data, and we adjust what people see every time they land on this very important pages.
That's very helpful. I definitely need to do a demo. It's very helpful. Let's move on to
I'd be happy to. Anybody who wants a demo, then by all means.
That's great. So as we move on to the next slide, which is I love it, secret sauce to effective personalizations, benefits of first-party data. So I will say the one question that, I think does keep everybody up at night is, okay, why to date, right? We've all spent all this time, money, effort in personalization. Why hasn't it worked, and why have consumers been disappointed? What are we retailers doing wrong, or what's not working?
It's a very good question. So first of all, what we see with customers that they invest in modeling, propensity model, decisioning systems, and the output of this is not necessarily connected or activated in an actual experience. So many of these investments, though the company thinks they invest in personalization, they do, of course, but it does not translate to an experience. And I always say that, but consumers don't experience data, they experience content. So whatever the output is of that decisioning. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, at least on the client side, the measurement of personalization is sometimes not done properly. There is a before and after, but it's not really the right measurement. It needs to run at the same time. So that's important. And the third, that is from the consumer part, though companies personalize, they still want to retain some mind share, so they communicate, sometimes over-communicate with customers. And despite that some communications are relevant, many others are not. And the mix of that just feels, sometimes I got the right offer, sometimes I got the right communication, but on at least every one of those, I got at least 1, 2, or 3 that were irrelevant. Some batch campaign in email, some SMS, some whatever it was. And I think they just don't feel it in that context. So
I mean,
it's competing priorities there, but this is, I think, what makes it a bit harder to discern from a client perspective.
I mean, I have to say, right, all of us, I mean, my favorite is, I've got retailers, right? I live in a Manhattan apartment, sending me advertising for, and it seems very personalized for a hot tub. I'm like, in a Manhattan apartment? I don't think so, right? Or, right, I have dogs, they send me things for cats. And so I think that, right, we all want it to work, right? The consumer, and hey, the retailers certainly do. But it is interesting, and it will be fascinating to see through this generative AI kind of how things change. So I want to move to the last slide, and we've had, first of all, amazing audience. Thank you, so many great questions. But I'm going to close us out to keep us somewhat on time with a question from Elaine, and I think this is a great one. Do you work with e-commerce sites? Any integrations with particular companies for shopping cart enhancements?
So we work with e-commerce sites. We integrate our own capability to deliver to the shopping cart. So we serve into the shopping cart directly, and this is because that way we can apply our algorithms to decide what language to show to a given customer. But yes, outside the shopping carts, for example, we integrate with most of the known names in the industry in terms of site optimization, if it's a site, of course. Maybe you're talking about CMS systems and things like that. We can integrate, and sometimes we do bespoke integrations if the clients wants them.
Great. And then, we're in the holiday season, and all feeling a bit of that holiday cheer. As you're thinking about the rest of the year, are there any tips, tricks that you have that you can share? And, is there anything that retailers still can do to impact their holiday season?
So if they don't leverage us yet, I would say the shopping cart. Again, I'm focusing on that because it's one place, it's easy, everybody has one. And think about what you can say to a customer beyond just continue. So, for example, did you thank them for reaching that point? Did you tell them something about their achievement? So achievement would be something like, you deserve the best, we think you made a great choice here. And that's it, and then a call to action. So think about emotional words that you can apply there that will potentially change the habitual, very rational messaging that you have there, which essentially does not drive behavior, just tells them what to do, but has nothing more than that. This is very easy. We have, by the way, we have research probably on our website around holiday communications in terms of what emotions are most usually the most powerful ones for retail. I think you can check the Persado website for that if you wanted to.
Great, Assaf. Never enough time. Too many questions. This is I think I do want to make sure we do offer up a demo. So we'll get that on the calendar and let everyone know. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for all of your amazing questions. We will also drop in the chat a report that we just published this week on Persado. And once again, there is still time to impact your holiday season. Assaf, as always, thank you for probably leaving us with more questions. Great answers, but you really have helped, I think, a lot of us on the call today, think differently about kind of where we are and where we're going. And want to thank you and Persado very much. Have a great holiday season.
Thank you very much. A pleasure always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.